Hello, everybody. My name is Bruce Montgomery, and this is my colleague, Tracy Priest.
Hello, everyone.
And we're with The Road to Retail. On our podcast, Tracy and I hope to offer insights and ideas for how emerging small and challenger CPG, consumer packaged goods, brands can establish and grow their business.
Bruce and I have been working in CPG commercial operations for over 30 years, working on brands of all sizes. By commercial operations, we mean all aspects involved in establishing and growing brands across channels and platforms. On our show, we bring on guests that are brand founders, leaders, investors, as well as all kinds of suppliers to these emerging brands that are subject matter experts to share their unique insights with the audience.
To keep up with the show, please follow the Road to Retail podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Leave us a review and consider sharing the show with a friend or colleague that may benefit from the content. You can also check out our website at www.road2retail.com and follow The Road to Retail on LinkedIn. Let's get to today's episode.
So Bruce, tell us about our newest sponsor.
Glad to, Tracy. Tired of getting crushed by chargebacks each time your brand sells product? From dealing with hundreds of forms that all look different to fighting tooth and nail to get repays, managing deductions is tough work. And you're almost certainly leaving money on the table. Fortunately, there's a solution. Fleetwood was built to help brands like yours. With Fleetwood's software platform, you can automate your deductions workflow, get insight into your trade spend, and even have your deductions disputed for you. Whether you're a scrappy young brand trying to break into retail or an established supplier looking to get sharper on trade, Fleetwood will put money back in your pocket. We've saved brands hundreds of thousands of dollars this year alone. Visit www.tryfleetwood.com to book a demo and learn more. That's www.tryfleet.com.
Again, we encourage you to subscribe to our iTunes or Spotify channel at Road, 2 Retail.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Road to Retail podcast. Folks, there he is. It's Tracy Priest once again. Tracy, how are you today, my friend?
I am good, Bruce. I am good. So excited about today's episode. We've got a great one here, and it's great to see you again. It's been a very busy week here at Road to Retail, so we're just having a lot of fun this week.
Yes. The traffic has been heavy on the Road to Retail, but we like it that way. So
Exactly.
Interesting episode today, a slightly different topic that we've covered a little bit, but it'll be nice to go into it in this depth. So Tracy, tell us who's joined us here today.
Yes, so we have Mary Kate Kloeblen. I want to make sure I say that right. And Mary Kate is the managing partner, co-founder of Golden Thread Operations. Welcome, Mary Kate, to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Tracy and Bruce. I'm excited.
This is going to be great. So before we dive in, we've got lots to cover today, but it's going to be a great episode for our small emerging brand audience. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to be a co-founder at Golden Thread Operations.
Yeah, it's a great question. So my background has always been in supply chain and logistics. My first role ever in my full-time career was actually at a third-party logistics warehouse. And so my job was process improvement of warehouse operations on the floor. What I found that was frustrating and interesting is that it was very clear to see where different areas of the supply chain where there was an issue, or a poor decision made further upstream in the supply chain, kind of materialized at the warehouse floor. And so that kind of created this curiosity around, hey, like I need to make this work stream more productive for picking and packing, but the forecasting was completely off. So we don't have the right staff. We don't have the right footprint to handle the volume that's coming through from our clientele. That's just an example. And so that curiosity drove me to want to better understand the supply chain as a whole and and seek out different experiences to be really well-rounded. After that initial experience, I really spent the next portion of my career working further upstream in the supply chain. So, working in purchasing, sourcing, planning, distribution, allocation for some larger, more traditional retailers in the apparel space. About 10 years ago, I got kind of this itch to be a little bit more autonomous in my work. And where that led me to was the world of CPG startups, and really haven't looked back since. And so, have been at a series of personal care CPG startups, spanning from fem care to supplements and medicine to healthcare. And it really became a passion just to work with early stage founders and teams to build a strong supply chain process from, you know, the upstream aspect of supply chain with sourcing and planning all the way down through logistics, warehouse, and final delivery to customer. So out over that time, I noticed, a lot of times the first 6 months of my career were really similar, roles rather, were really similar in that, it was a lot of the same processes needed to be cleaned up between, all these different businesses that I worked for in my full-time life. And so that kind of spurred this thought of like, I see these opportunities. I see a lot of these same brands that I've worked for have a lot of the same issues. Like there has to be an opportunity here to serve brands in this way so that as they grow, they're not facing kind of the same issues that spur further cleanup, almost when it's like a little bit too late in their growth cycle. So that kind of spurred the idea of consulting. And about 2 years ago, I went out and just started, networking as a consultant. It was kind of serendipitous in that, my last full-time company closed down. Typical story, ran out of money, had trouble fundraising. And so it kind of was a forcing function to take a leap of faith and go out on my own and start to put myself out there. And what's been really interesting is that it's not only expanded my experience with different types of product and supply chains, but it's also proven to me that there is a real need for this type of consulting work. And there's not very many operators out there who are offering these kind of fractional services to these emerging brands. So it's been gratifying. It's been a whirlwind of 2 years, a lot of changes and scaling the business and growing. And on that regard, it's honestly just been a lot of fun at the end of the day and seeing these improvements with different clients and seeing success stories and helping them change for the better. So that's kind of me in
Awesome.
a nutshell on how I came to be into Golden Thread operations.
Well, that's a great primer for the rest of the discussion here, and going through several startups and finding the emerging brands, occasionally running out of money, learning lessons the hard way, but it also sharpens the spear, right?
Yeah.
So Mary Kate, as we push in here a little bit, why don't you tell the listeners, who many of which are involved in one way, shape, or form with emerging small or challenger brands, about the specific services Golden Thread Operations provides?
Yeah, so we are a full like end-to-end supply chain fractional service provider, as well as we do offer some more business operations support as well. So what that more specifically looks like is I have a business partner and she and I will go into clients as kind of their fractional head of operations and plug into auditing their current supply chain, building out opportunities, overseeing projects from like hypothetical to execution, and really just being embedded with the team. And I think the embedded part is what is interesting because as operators, like we've always found that the most successful supply chains teams are embedded with all areas of the business. So we really pride ourselves as being fractional, but being fractional in the sense of like, we're really there with you and we really want to talk to all team members, not just, the operations team. We want to talk to finance, we want to talk to sales. Um, that's the bulk of what we do in terms of services. However, we also do scoped projects too, and that can look like anything from an operational audit and doing a 2 week sprint to kind of work with a brand on learning their operations and pointing out and scoring their operations in terms of like what's working and by area, what needs improvement, and kind of helping them build an opportunity map and understand where they need to focus in first in terms of fixing or changing. We also do things like building supply models and demand models, so that clients have, better visibility into what they need to purchase and how their inventory looks, as well as other things too, like helping them find better service providers, RFPing, putting out proposals. So we kind of do a little bit of everything outside of just end-to-end fractional operational work too.
So thank you. One quick follow-up here, Mary Kate. So do you work with the client brand? Let's just say it's a brand. And do you also work with their distributors, or do you just work with the brand and then say, this is what you guys need to tell your distributors, or do you supply that bridge?
We'll supply that bridge. It depends on the client and what they need and their team size, but we'll typically be contracted directly by the client, but have a hand in kind of the delivery of their supply chain. And so, what that could look like is, a client onboards a new customer, and that customer has a distributor that they work through. We'll help with kind of the operational readiness to be ready to um, start to supply goods to that distributor and sell to that customer. So, launch checklists, integrating the distributor with the client, making sure that both are set up for success for the ultimate like delivery to customer. Though we also do work with outside of brands, we do work with some contract manufacturers as well. Um, and what's interesting about that is we're able to bring in best process that we know from the brand side so that the contract manufacturer can better serve their
Oh,
own brands that they're producing
wow.
for. So,
That is so
sure.
needed. Because
Yeah.
if you're a
Great.
small emerging brand, let me just jump in here. And we've had episodes with other contract manufacturers, but if you're a brand and you're just starting out, you don't, I mean, do you help the client find the right contract manufacturer and get set up and set up those expectations that here's understanding the lead time and all that kind of stuff?
Yes. And then inversely, like one of our clients is a contract manufacturer, so we're able to also inversely like help them better serve the brands that
Oh,
they're
wow.
manufacturing for too, because to your point, you know, there's a lot of thinking across, tables and disciplines, right, to be successful operationally. And so um, to your point, like small brands do really rely on these early partners to help them set themselves up for success. Um, However, contract manufacturers aren't, brands. They don't always understand how Walmart distribution works. And so, or something of that nature. And so, being able to service like the contract manufacturers we do from a consulting side also helps them understand, oh, we really need to know what a routing guide looks like and, operational requirements so that we can better tell the smaller brands that we work with, and advise them on how best to kind of manufacture what makes sense in terms of case packs. What are the best guidelines or best practices for logistics, everything from carton dims to pallet specs, all that fun stuff. So, to your point, it's very much a need to be integrated on both ends because there's a lot of small details that
Oh,
end up
yeah.
mattering in the long run.
Absolutely. No doubt. No doubt. So tell our audience a little bit about like at what stage does a small emerging brand need to think about hiring, your for your services
Yeah, it's
that you offer at Golden Thread?
yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think it really depends on the founder, and I know that's kind of a cop-out answer in some ways, but I think there are founders who maybe have more of an operational brain and they might not need support until, you know, it outgrows their own expertise. I would say on that lens, that probably becomes more of like a bandwidth and a scale kind of conversation of when we could come in and help. And so I would say as they're scaling, beyond a certain volume or they prove out product market fit and are starting to get interest from different distribution channels, and retailers, I think that's where we can kind of come in and help them scale up successfully. On the other hand, I've also worked with founders who have been more marketing and sales focused or creative. And I think when it comes to founders who are kind of in that bucket, um, you know, it's hard for them to understand or conceptualize what the supply chain should look like. And so we've also worked with early stage founders who are more on the creative side to kind of even give them a sense or framework of, this is how you should set things up to just operate baseline. And I think the level of support needed there is obviously going to be different than a full-fledged brand, but a lot of what we've found with those types of more creative founders is that just giving them the frameworks to work within to get launched, to get product out the door, to deliver to customers, is super valuable. And then at that point, after they have the framework in place and they understand how to run it, it's just, they can often do it themselves for a period of time until they hit that scale up point. So, yeah, it's fascinating. And again, a kind of a cop out answer because
No, no,
so
no.
many
But
founders have different backgrounds.
I would say though, if you're a founder that's more on the creative or sales, yeah, or marketing side of things, hiring you earlier is better. But if
Yes.
you do have a logistics background, maybe you can afford to wait a little bit more. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say.
Yeah, awesome.
All right,
Bruce?
Mary Kate, we're going to go back to back here with a couple of your war stories to give folks out there some things to think about so they can say, oh, that's what I need to do. And also, ooh, I don't want to do that. So let's start with what are a few of the mistakes or fumbles that you see an emerging brand make repeatedly? Not that the same brand keeps making it, but maybe five brands. It's always like, boy, why do they all seem to do X and shoot their toes off? So, what are one or two things that you've just seen multiple times so that you can educate the group out there like, hey, let's try not to be on this list of brands that did these two things.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think often there's certain kind of stress tests that are missed in a launch process, usually because, you're looking to get your product out the door, there's, delays, et cetera. But it's really important to always ensure that, you're stress testing your packaging in terms of how it performs when it's in transit. Um, you're stress testing how things run on the production line because there's surprises and it's, a label might not fit how you thought it would fit. A color change on a bottle might look different when there's product inside of it versus, the samples that you got at home. Um, and, this case, which seemed great, and was a great, cost saver, when it's in transit to a retailer, it might crush and damage your product. And so those are like the small details that I think everyone misses at certain points of their, life cycle. And it kind of seems like, okay, it adds in another few weeks of testing, it adds in another few weeks of verification, but a lot of times like those small details are the things that matter to retailers and customers at the end. So if a retailer or customer is receiving like a crushed box and all the product can't be stocked,
Good.
it's not going to be helpful to them. But it could have been prevented by a ship test, or it could have been prevented by a drop test of the carton with the product inside. Or so I think those are the small things that aren't necessarily mistakes, but they're overlooked. And then there's always a moment that every brand has where there's a learning of, oh, we need to bake in more of this time to make sure everything is ticked and tied in that way.
So
And
do you
folks,
and
before we kick it to Tracy to ask the positive question, since I asked the negative, those shipping tests that Mary Kate's talking about are crucial because
Yes.
everything looks great on a whiteboard or on the conference room table or at your kitchen table with your two partners. One super easy way that we have heard brands do shipping tests, and I've done this myself, have what you think is your optimal case put together with your inner pack. So what an inner pack is, folks, is if you're shipping a dozen, an inner pack will be like a shrink wrapped group of three, which just makes distribution to retailers easier. And ship it to someone you know, like on the West Coast, and have them ship it right back to you. And then open it up and see if it's a disaster or if it actually measured up. So that's just a super simple way to attack something Mary Kate's talking about. Tracy?
Yep. So Mary Kate, on that, so do you, when you sign up a client and they haven't shipped to a retailer before, do you really say, hey, before we move forward, we've got to stress test your packaging and your case pack? You do, I would imagine that that's a requirement.
Yeah, it's baked into like a launch process.
Okay.
And so yes, like it's definitely part of the process. And in the times where we've had to cut it short, you know, you always find things, or if there's pushback, in terms of, oh, do we really need that? Like we need to move faster. And so I would say it's just like this valuable step, just for that final like verification, because once your product's out in the world, you know, it's hard to kind of
Yeah.
get back that first impression.
Absolutely. So on the flip side, Bruce was the Grim Reaper today on mistakes, but tell us a little bit about maybe a brand or two that made all the right moves.
Yeah, it's a great question. Um,
And you don't need to name names of the brands,
yeah,
but just the actions they took. Although most
Yeah.
brands like it when people say positive things.
yeah, we love that. I think on the logistics front, I'm just pulling from past experiences, like one instance where I feel like things really went right a lot of the time was during my time at Lola. We had a period of time where we were scaling up really on the D2C front. And doing packaging changes, scaling up for retail launches, things of that nature. And I think something that really went right on that team is that we had like these very detailed processes to cover all these different points of the supply chain as we were scaling up and as we were kind of working through different product changes and launches. And so on that piece, there always were small mistakes that happened, but I think we got it right because in preventing more mistakes from happening because we were very focused on that process. And we really held our ground around maintaining that process, even if there was pressure to move faster. Because at the end of the day, like I mentioned, there's color checks, there's SKUs set up, there's ensuring, product gets to your warehouse like a few weeks ahead of a launch to mitigate any issues. The ship tests, tests on integrations between systems, um, pressure testing and training the fulfillment center on how to, handle the product. And so I think those processes were derived from a lot of like kind of learnings we had early in that business and learnings from different businesses that we worked with. And so I think once we kind of had all those learnings combined into a process and that, the process was the process, we were able to kind of mitigate a lot of larger scale issues, or if there were things that popped up, we were able to fix them without, further delays to a launch or to an artwork change. And so I think for me, like the characteristic in operations and logistics is that of like what's successful and what goes right and how to make things go right is not just being process oriented and building in contingencies, but also like really evaluating every time you go through a launch or go through an issue or work through the inevitable thing that goes wrong with, and that happens in operations all the time. The more that you evaluate and reflect and kind of build in safeguards against it, the more strong your supply chain becomes. And so I think at the core of it, like that's the characteristic is like always evaluating, like never taking something for face value, looking at, like I said, inevitably things go wrong in operations. When that happens, taking a look at why, being curious, doing retros on it,
Yeah.
just maintaining that repository so that you can always kind of continue to iterate upon what you're doing.
Great
Yeah.
advice. Great advice.
So a couple of things, folks, that Mary Kate just said. One of them is always be learning. And when you have an issue, document it so you can figure out why it happened. And everyone's always like, I'm so busy. I can't do
Yeah.
that. Well, then if you don't document it and fix it, you're always going to be doing stuff two or three times, which is kind of crazy. All right. So, Mary Kate, we've talked about your interaction with the client brands. Let's take it to the other partner in this dance, which is the retailer. So,
Yeah.
Tracy and I, we have a series of bumper stickers in the online Road to Retail store. And one of them is that the only thing that a retailer hates more than a brand that doesn't sell is one that doesn't ship.
Yeah.
So, what advice would you give to a brand when there's been a snafu and they have a cranky retailer? How do you help them work through, the bill of lading, which, folks, that's just the documentation that accompanies a shipment, or, they were supposed to get a pallet and they got 8 cases. How do you coach
Yeah.
them to interact with their retailer?
Yeah. Well, I think first and foremost, like transparency is always key. I with one of our clients, I think something they do really well is maintain those really close relationships with retailers and buyers, as well as brokers, and like give them enough information for them to understand like if an issue is coming down the pipeline and what to expect and what we're doing about it. So I think proactive communication and transparency, enough transparency where, they have an understanding of what might happen or what did happen, but not too much to kind of create panic. And then lastly, it's always about like, how do we make this right? And then how do we prove that, we're in a position that we're going to prevent a problem from happening again in the future. And so, on those tokens, like I think in any key relationship, like those three things feel key is like really all boiling down to like creating the inner workings of like a great collaboration. And so I think, again, things are always evolving. And like I mentioned, like things often don't go right in operations. Like there's problems that happen because there's a lot of changing hands. So I think practicing those skills, really is key because it's going to come up. Like things go wrong. So I think really the strengthening of the relationship with better communication is important.
Yeah, so folks, quickly, when Tracy and I have done interviews with the retailers, one of the things I'll never forget, a buyer told us one of the worst mistakes any brand can make, from gargantuan to tiny, is assuming we won't figure something out. They
Yeah.
have armies of people looking at data. So bad news should always travel faster than good. So
Hmm.
bring it up front, identify what happened, why it happened, and what you're doing to fix it. So Mary Kate, real quickly, especially for the people that are a little newer, tell people out there what an OTIF score is and why it's important to maintain a good one with each of your retailers. So you please explain even what OTIF is. And you don't have to go on for 20 minutes. This is pretty simple once a person
Yeah.
with your background explains it.
So OTIF stands for on time and in full. And literally that means were your shipments delivered on time per what was prescribed in the PO, and were they delivered in full, meaning did you deliver everything that was ordered? And so that's really just it simplistically, like how are you delivering against the PO?
Awesome. So,
Yeah, and sorry, Tracy. So, folks, you've heard this before on other interviews, but maintaining a good OTIF score with a retailer sends them a couple of messages. A good one means you actually have your act together and they're happy to see you. There are other retailers that if your OTIF score is bad and you can't execute the basics, like getting your stuff to them so they can put it on the shelf to sell, some retailers won't even give you a meeting. Others, that'll be the only thing you talk about. So you think you're going in there to talk about your hot new line extension, and they're like, hey, Bruce, table that. what's going on over here. Sorry, Trace.
No, that's fine. So, Mary Kate, let's talk about a partnership. So, when a small emerging brand is starting out, having good business partners across all disciplines is really important. But tell us a little bit about why really having the right logistics partner is so critical to a small emerging
Yeah.
brand.
Well, I think for a lot of reasons, one of which Bruce, I think, did a great job just mentioning, which is if your logistics partner is not getting things out, not packing things correctly, that's going to become the only thing you talk about with your retailer. And I've seen this switch from a poor logistics provider to a successful one and how that's changed the trajectory of a business because of conversations with retailers going from, man, can you even execute upon, your business and brand promise to having that not even be part of the equation and being able to have higher level discussions with the buyer around line extensions, strategy, marketing, all the fun things that they actually want to be talking about to boost their business and their category. And I think the other piece of it is that your logistics provider houses one of the largest kind of assets of your business, which is your inventory. Emerging brands are cash poor a lot of times.
Yeah.
It's hard to get additional capital. POs, especially as you're scaling up, it's a risk for a business to take on additional inventory. And so if the place that is supposed to be housing that inventory is mishandling it, whether they're losing inventory, they're mispacking it, that investment on inventory that the brand is making goes out the door and it becomes more difficult. Um, so for me, that's also how I think about it is this partner is so critical because you know, there's a lot of money that small brands don't always have readily available that gets tied into this relationship in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Bruce?
So, Mary Kate, when a brand calls you and may need your help, what are the questions they should be asking?
Yeah. So they should be asking a few different things. When they're calling me for support in finding a new logistics partner, I think the things that I always like to make sure that they get insight to is like how does their brand size compare to the others that the logistics provider is using? You don't want brands to be, you know, the largest brand the logistics provider is servicing, nor the smallest, because if you're the largest, then kind of the ceiling of finding other opportunities to kind of find cost savings by economies of scale is kind of capped out unless your business continues to grow. And if you're the smallest, then you're not prioritized in the same way. So kind of being somewhere in the middle of the brand size that the logistics provider services allows you to both take advantage of the economies of scale that are being driven by larger clients while also keeping their attention by way of, having steady growth and steady number of orders. And often the middle-sized brands are what are most profitable for these logistics providers as well. And so they really want to keep them happy. The other things I would ask as well is, just really understanding the type of retailers that they service. In this day and age, like a logistics provider that's able to service direct to consumer businesses is not super hard for them to do with how technology has advanced. And so, a lot of providers can handle e-commerce businesses very easily, but where the real complication comes in is handling, the retailer requirements. Every single retailer has like their own set of ways of doing things and needing to receive product in certain ways and their own challenges. And so really understanding that experience of, the retailers that they service, their guidance in terms of how an emerging brand can best service them, et cetera, is so important. And then lastly, it's is the relationship one that is like consultative? All as like a operator in general, on behalf of my brands like that I work with, I'll often look to certain providers to kind of help me think through problems. An example of that is a product that I work with that's temperature sensitive. Reaching out to the third-party logistics provider to understand, like, have you worked with a temperature sensitive product before? What's your advice? How have you handled this for other clients that have a product like this? Because these are the three issues that we're seeing. Um, those things I think are invaluable, just for emerging brands to have that relationship and that advice. So those would be like the questions and thoughts around like what a brand should ask for and look for as they're evaluating.
That's great. Great advice. So talk to our audience a little bit about how logistics companies get like yours gets compensated.
Yeah. So often it's based off of order volumes. They provide, so typically they should provide like a very comprehensive rate card. There's going to be different areas of, how they bill. There's charges that are related more to overhead, charges that are variable based off of order volume. But at the end of the day, and then charges related to like actually like the cost of shipping out product and the cost to like a FedEx or a freight provider. And so through those different charges, they're looking at their own labor costs and their own cost to kind of deliver on the business and then adding in margin. Like any business, they have to make a margin. But I think as brands kind of understand and look at, these rate cards and understand how they're being billed by their logistics provider, it's really important for them to do a comprehensive view and look at all the charges, not just certain aspects of them. Um, because different providers will bake in their margins in different areas of their operation. So that would be kind of just like without getting too far into it and nerding out completely, that's like a lesson that's always been drilled in my head, which is you get a rate card from a third-party logistics provider. You look at all of it. You calculate all of it into like an apples to apples format to see at, the end of the day, like how much are you really going to pay per order when you look at storage, order processing, all the ancillary charges, the parcel charges, etc.
So Mary Kate, kind of a follow-up there. So now that you've explained how a party like Golden Thread gets compensated, what traits or characteristics do you and your partners, your team, look for in a client before bringing them on? We've had people say, if you're still using like a Gmail or Yahoo account as your email, you're probably not ready for prime time. We've heard people say things they want to see a certain number of years in business. They want to know you have at least some distribution. What are your, two or three kind of back of the envelope rules of thumb before you'll even schedule like an hour-long capabilities meeting with somebody?
Yeah. Well, I think, size is never really a factor because we work with clients both small and large. And so we're not necessarily looking at that, but we're looking at different characteristics in terms of their business and the founder or the point of contact as an operator and how they even think about their business. So I think on that piece, just to kind of break that down further, when I look at businesses, is it a viable product that has product market fit? Is there a scalability to it? Is there something that is going to really ensure that as a client, like their business is going to be successful, even just barring the operational side of it? And so some of that is a little bit less metric driven, but I think just really having them have had the concept proven out is really important to us. The other side of it, in terms of the leaders that we work with, is we really want to work with leaders who want to be open to change. And so sometimes people come to us and they say, oh, we need all this help and, et cetera, et cetera. But maybe aren't open to like the constructive side of it. And I think of like what we're seeing and what we would change and what we think that they need help with. And I think really at the end of the day, we pride ourselves on collaboration and building strong partner relationships. And so that takes two. And if we feel like there's not really a sense of collaboration or not really a sense of being open to doing things a little bit differently, then it's really hard to make changes and help them be successful. So
Absolutely.
I think those are kind of the two biggest things. I know those are like a little bit like cushier or softer, but I
No,
No,
think
but
they're important.
go ahead,
yeah.
Tracy.
No, that's just really important because if you get a founder who's like, hey, I really need your help, but we're going to do it this way because that's the way we've been doing it, that's a problem.
Exactly. And it's,
Eh,
it's not, I mean, being helpful and supportive is always what we try to be, but um, but if they're experiencing problems and there's no appetite to change or move towards something else, there's not really much we can help with then, right? Like we can't impose changes or have a lot of success in that because it does take some buy-in as well.
Sure.
Well,
Absolutely.
and again, like any relationship, whether it's, a friend or someone on your pickleball team, if there are
Yeah.
such things, and I'm sure there are, if every time their name lights up on your phone, you have to like take two deep breaths. I mean, you better be getting well paid because obviously you're suffering. All
Yeah.
right, Mary Kate, we're rounding third, heading for
Right.
home here. So, who's had the greatest influence on your career so far, and what did you learn from this person that's really stuck with you? And again, you don't need to name names, but like, what's an example when you're like, man, when that first happened, I thought they were really harsh on me with that feedback, and here a couple years later, it's like that was good. I needed that.
Yeah. I mean, I go back to kind of my first full-time role, which was for me at the time like a big one. I was entry level, coming into, a third-party logistics company that had been pre-established, and my job was to shake up processes, and it was tough. So my first boss really gave me strong foundation in terms of like how to structure projects, how to get buy-in from folks who might not see the things the same way as you, and how to really work with people across all different levels. And in fairness, like she had really high expectations. And so it was stressful at the time, but she also primed me to be always thinking ahead and proactive, and she challenged me a ton. So I think I always think about that experience in terms of how transformative it was. Because I really saw firsthand of like the value of collaboration and the value of working across teams and how that impacts projects. And the other one's like a little bit cheesy, but my business partner, Stacy Corona, we've worked together off and on for 10 years, and she was actually my boss for a period of time. And I think she's taught me so much, not only about like operations and logistics, but also like how to kind of push myself in different ways. And we always laugh because, we're a great team in the sense that the core of us is very similar, but also our approaches are different. I tend to be like more of a softie, and she tends to be more of that like right brain, like this is our plan and process. And so um, she pushes me to think about things differently and also is open to me doing the same to her. And I think that relationship in our full-time lives working together, as her direct report, and her being my manager, um, it really showed in me about like the value of having ideas, being open to expressing them, but also like being pushed to see things from a different lens. And I think when you have folks in your life that are able to do that, it's just such like a value add. But you have to kind of lower your ego to be able to accept it too. And I think it's
Sure.
always great to be, I think, humbled in that sense.
Yeah. Awesome. So our final topic of today and our favorite is, so tell our audience who your favorite sports team, band, or brand is and why you support them.
Oh, it's so interesting. Oh my gosh. This is a tricky one. I think this is the hardest question you've asked me. Um, well, I guess in terms of band, I really love kind of like the classic rock of the 70s
Now
type
you're
of
talking
band.
Bruce's language. Okay,
Yes.
go ahead.
Influenced by my parents, who were both deadheads. But for
We're gonna have
me,
your parents on next.
you would love them. Yeah. But So that's kind of where my brain goes, but I think even within that realm, like honestly, I love like Stevie Nicks and I love Fleetwood Mac. And for me, like such a big part of my career is that I've always been in a male-dominated kind of industry, to be honest with you. And so I've always appreciated strong women, and I've appreciated women kind of moving and shaking in areas where maybe, um, maybe it wasn't, there weren't a ton of women representing in those areas. And so I look at someone like Stevie Nicks who like came in and, kind of shook up this band and has a really strong individual presence, but also helped build this band with a ton of international presence and recognition. Like for me, I just think of someone like that, and I'm like, okay, she really changed how people view women in business, in music, and you know,
She's definitely I think she's in the Hall of Fame singularly and with Fleetwood Mac.
yeah.
So Mary Kate, this has been fantastic. How can people get in touch with you or learn more about Golden Thread operations?
Yeah, so I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So I'd say just finding me on LinkedIn, finding our page, Golden Thread Operations, is a great start. We also have a website, that allows folks to kind of inbound to us and submit, request forms for meetings and things like that. So those are the two best ways. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
No, that would be great. So thanks again for your time. Okay, Tracy, the big finish.
Absolutely, Mary Kate. This has been really a great episode and learning about your business, but also about just the importance of logistics. It's just
Yeah.
so important. And I think sometimes founders think they can do it on their own and I can do this. And in a lot of cases, they stumble and make some pretty big mistakes. And I think your company can help them avoid that. So thank you, audience. Thank you, Mary Kate, for joining us today. Audience, continue to follow us on our Spotify channel as well as Apple Podcast. Also, our YouTube channel. We post on LinkedIn every Tuesday. You can also check out our episodes on our website, which is www.road, the number two, retail.com. So again, thank
Awesome.
you. Thank you for joining us. And Mary Kate, you were awesome. This was a great, great episode. We really appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me, and I had a ton of fun. So I'm excited to kind of listen in.
All
That's
right. Well, good
awesome.
luck out there, folks.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.